Today I want to talk about building and maintaining a natural pond. For this video, we'll call a natural pond a pond with no liner and no pump or moving filter. I want to talk about some of the challenges I've faced and how you could avoid these same mistakes. G'day, my name is Kev. The aim of my channel and website is to help people build and maintain ponds without spending a fortune. If that sounds like something that interests you, please like and subscribe. This is a pond that sits behind my wholesale plant nursery. It has no liner and it is fed by water runoff. You can see I am running some bubble pumps, and that's because without them the pond was a stagnant, smelly mess. Even though I've been forced to add the bubble pumps, I do think it's possible to avoid needing them. That is, if you follow some things that I didn't understand when this pond was dug. So first I'll talk about why this pond turned into a problem so you can avoid those mistakes, and then I'll talk about some options that are available if you had a similar natural pond that needs some TLC. The first problem is that this pond receives nutrient-rich runoff. As you can see, it sits below the nursery. You can only imagine the amount of nutrient the water picks up as it runs through all those pots. Even though we consciously use natural fertilizers, it's still nutrient for the pond all the same. Nutrients are a problem because they stimulate plant growth, and the most opportunistic plant you'll find in a pond is algae. Algae is natural, and we actually want it present in small amounts. It's beneficial for small life forms, including baby fish. It's able to convert some of that nutrient into food. But if it overwhelms the pond, it leads to a constant cycle of growth and decomposition. That looks and smells horrible. The cycle goes something like this. Algae will grow super quickly to consume the nutrients in the pond. Then the algae dies, and as it starts to decompose, that releases nutrients back into the pond. Then the oxygen levels in the pond crash. This impacts all the life within the pond, leading to fish kills, tadpoles, basically anything in the pond that relies on oxygen, which is almost everything. And all that death releases more nutrients. And now you're on this horrible, never-ending roller coaster where more and more nutrients build up. And all that constant boom and bust of plant algae growth just turns the pond into a sediment trap. Eventually it will just become a bog. So one of the first challenges for any natural pond is to avoid it filling with water that's laden with nutrients. Even just runoff through the yard is picking up nutrients. Water that comes from surrounding agricultural land will also contain loads of nutrients. So you might be a bit confused. How the heck am I supposed to fill this pond when the water coming in is going to cause problems? Well, one thing you could do is establish lots of terrestrial plants around the pond. Terrestrial plants are just plants that go in the ground. This will help slow the flow of water rushing into the pond so that it percolates through the soil and enters the pond after the roots of the plants have had a chance to remove some of the nutrients. One popular method is to create little swales or mounds on the slope that the water travels down to reach the pond. This will help trap nutrient-rich sediments while also allowing the water to slow down in velocity. This gives it more time to have the nutrients stripped away by the soil and the plants. If you have a big enough area, you can create wetlands or bogs in the base of the swales. I've added a wetland behind the nursery to help strip away some of the nutrients. Here I've got an area filled with rock, gravel and plants. That provides homes to beneficial microbes and bacteria. You can also see I'm adding in more plantings around this pond to hopefully prevent more nutrient reaching the pond. The more I can remove, the healthier the pond will become over time. And it's not just terrestrial plants. If we can add in more higher order aquatic plants, they can take up more of the nutrients. Every now and then it doesn't hurt to thin out the aquatic plant growth. Think about it this way. The plants are feeding on the nutrient, and the nutrients are removed from the water and stored in the plant. So if we allow the plants to decompose in the pond, the nutrients are re-released into the pond. By removing some of the foliage from the aquatic plants, you remove that stored nutrient completely from the pond. Another problem this pond has is when the guy who built it added in the overflow, he didn't put the pipe level. So when the pond overflows, it's very difficult for anything that is on the surface of the pond to be sucked out. Having surface debris flushed out of the pond every so often helps remove some of those organics, like leaves and dead plant material. If they can leave the pond before starting to decompose, we avoid needing to deal with the nutrients that they will release. So a good overflow will work like a pond skimmer in a more man-made natural pond. Those of you that follow the channel will have heard and seen me talk about how good a skimmer is for helping with overall pond health. If you're new and you haven't already seen those videos, they're worth taking a look at. It can be difficult to achieve great water clarity in a natural pond, although I think there are some things you can do that will help. The first problem is that with no liner, the clay and mud is easily stirred up anytime something or someone walks into the pond. Once suspended, clay particles naturally resist clumping together. This is why most new dams appear so muddy. It's simply just the clay particles suspended in the water column. There are flocculants that can be purchased to force these particles to clump together, and then they'll sink. These can be quite economical on small ponds, but on larger ponds the cost can become prohibitive. If I could redo this pond, I would have added a geotextile fabric over the clay. These fabrics will still allow water to pass through, but they'll prevent the clay from being able to mix with the water. And that also allows you to add rock and gravel without worrying that it's just going to sink into the mud. I think rock and gravel help naturalise a pond. They prevent erosion and they provide more surface area for good bacteria and microbes, which are ultimately responsible for how good the water quality is going to be. Geotextile's much cheaper than liner, but it still might be prohibitively expensive on large ponds. But I still think it's something you should give serious consideration to, particularly around the margins of the pond. Of course, the margins are going to be the areas where animals or humans are more likely to stir up debris. So I hope I haven't made this video too long, but I just want to go through the main points really quick that I think you need to consider if you plan on building a natural pond. So first we have the quality of the water that's going into the pond. If it's nutrient-rich runoff, think about some of the methods I mentioned to help purify the water before it reaches the pond. If you're lucky enough that the pond is only going to be fed by a pristine natural spring or water from the roof, then there's no need to worry about trying to purify it further. But always add plenty of terrestrial and aquatic plants in and around the pond. Make sure that the surface debris can easily escape every time the pond overflows. Remember, if it can't, it's trapped and it will break down and release nutrients inside the pond. And lastly, consider adding a geotextile or some kind of membrane, at least on the margins, to prevent clay being stirred up and mixing with the water. So if you address those issues, I can't see any reason why you can't have a decent looking, healthy natural pond. If your existing pond has issues and you'd like to see how I added the bubble pumps, I'll link that video in the description. And if you're interested, it's really easy to create a natural looking pond using a liner and pumps. These ponds are super low maintenance, filtered using bog filters and energy efficient pumps. You can easily achieve crystal clear water year round. If you're interested, I'll leave some links in the description for you to check out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.